Hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining us this evening. This is the second panel for Colorado Headwaters Land Trust Hats Off for Headwaters 2021, which is our annual fundraising event. This year, as last year, it's a week-long event with numerous panels on Zoom, such as tonight, as well as a silent auction that goes on all week, culminating in our big banquet event on Sunday, October 10th at the Headwaters Center in Winter Park. If you are interested in attending that, you can find all that information on our website. You can type into the chat if you'd like that information or find it elsewhere. Tonight is our landowner panel, which will be with three landowners that have conservation easements on their property in Grant County. Tonight we have Mike Brooks and Kathy Kenoble, who I will ask to unmute and start their videos so we can see them. And then hopefully joining us will also be Broc and Susan Cote, who recently purchased a property with a conservation easement on it already. Kathy and Mike here are both original grantors of their conservation easements. As you saw in the slideshow, as you were entering the waiting room, we have the silent auction is going on, and that'll be a lot of fun. We have a lot of great artwork and other unique items in this auction, and all of that will come and benefit the land trust and our mission of conserving land, water, and other resources throughout Grant County for the benefit of all of Grant County, both residents and visitors. This panel, as we did on Sunday evening, I have some prepared questions that I'll ask our panelists tonight. That will take roughly half an hour. And then we do have some audience members here tonight, and you are welcome to ask questions to the panelists either in chat or come that time, you can ask to unmute and I will unmute you for that option as well. So we'll start. Dr. Brooks, if you would like to introduce yourself and say who you are. A lot of people already know you in the county, but since tonight is being recorded and might be watched by people who don't have pets in Granby, I would appreciate you introducing yourself.
Hi, Mike Brooks. Moved here full-time 1984. Started as a veterinarian right out of vet school in Granby. Haven't been anywhere else. I enjoy outdoor activities. In my spare time, I like to cut, irrigate, and grow hay, raise cows, calves, sell my calves. Have done a little grass-fed meat program, and right now most of my time is occupied by my mixed animal practice, and that's what I do.
All right. And Kathy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Kathy Kenoble. I live in Lakewood, Colorado full-time, and have been really fortunate to be able to have the 230 acres in Grand County that my husband left. And and I get up during the summertime with my horse and the dogs and just enjoy the outdoors up there, and have not been up there yet. I need to come up and get some firewood, so I'll be up soon. And if you're in the office, Jeremy, I'll stop in and say hello.
Okay. Thank you. And I see Broc and Susan are here. I apologize. I didn't recognize the name in the attendance list. So if you would unmute, maybe, there we go. And introduce yourselves as well.
All right, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I don't know why it shows owner. I guess we should put in Broc and Susan.
Yeah.
Hey, anyway, so the two of us, we purchased a piece of land last year. I guess we got bored during COVID and we went out looking for something to do, and we found a beautiful, almost 4 acres worth, and we were very interested in the piece of property. We put an offer on it, and then we started figuring out that, oh, half of it's a conservation easement, and we're like, what does that mean exactly? So we got all the documents. We did a lot of homework, and Jeremy, we got, thank you for getting together with us, and we learned everything we needed to know about purchasing a piece of property that had a conservation easement. Hey, we didn't get a tax break. You explained that to us right off the bat. So, but in any event, we found that it did not change our opinion of the piece of property. In fact, if anything, it kind of bolstered it, recognizing that half of that property now is going to be always kept without any improvements. And we kind of like that. It's a buffer in the neighborhood. And so that's how we got involved. And yeah, we've had a good time working with you guys. So thanks.
We
Great.
live full time down in Castle Rock and then spend as much time as we can there. And our hope is to build a nice little mountain retreat on our property.
Yeah.
Spend more time.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. And Broc, your answer leads into our first question. And I'll start with Dr. Brooks again of why did you initially decide to pursue a conservation easement on your property?
Well, certainly we, one thing unique about our conservation as easement, we're called the Granby Five. I'm surrounded by 4 other conservation easement holders. We happen to own and irrigate and ranch that meadow just south of Windy Gap Reservoir. When you're at the wildlife viewing area, you can look across Windy Gap and see that fairly vast meadow. So together we all decided, hey, let's see if we can't tie this whole valley up and make it one continuous conservation easement. So it was kind of a concerted effort for all of us to get together and do the same thing. Mainly, as far as the easement itself, it certainly tied our very senior Fraser River water rights to the land. None of us wanted to see that water diverted out of this basin. So that conservation easement tied up, oh boy, I'm not sure how many CFS of water, at least 5 CFS, which is a considerable amount of water. That area has a historic value for ranching, wildlife migration, the scenic easement, just the continuity, trying to not fragment the ecosystem for obvious reasons. Certainly there were they dangled the carrot for the tax benefits, the federal tax benefits and the state benefits were especially useful. It helped me a little bit. I was early on buying that land. We put it into easement fairly quickly after I bought my land. And certainly there were some financial benefits to that. But all of us decided that it would probably boost the value of all of our land if we all did it. And certainly the wildlife corridor has been kind of maintained a little better. So those are some of the main issues.
That's great. Thank you. And
Yeah.
Kathy, would you like to elaborate on why you decided to
Yeah.
conserve your property?
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. Basically, my husband's grandfather had homesteaded the ranch back in the late 1800s, and it was used and acquired for agricultural purposes. And it was always my late husband's desire to put his inherited share of 230 acres into some kind of a conservation protection to protect the agricultural heritage for Grand County that it was intended for, as well as the wildlife. He was an avid hunter and worshiped the animals and the fowl that naturally cohabitat on the property, where it's located about 9,000 feet. So in the summertime, his particular piece of the ranch was used for summer grazing, and the other parts of the ranch have been sold off. But he wanted to protect that, and again, like Dr. Brooks mentioned, basically for the wildlife migration patterns, which has changed, altered a little bit, and just the view corridor. It would be absolutely horrendous to lose the agricultural use of the property and just have it subdivided and just ruin the whole purpose of having that little piece of heaven. And so I pursued the conservation easement with Land Trust, and I was so grateful to the people that came to visit with me, explain the process to me. I didn't have any idea that there would be some benefits to tax breaks benefits, but my main goal was to protect the property. into perpetuity for conservation. And, but I am still fighting with the state. I mean, I only had 230 acres. Come to find out there's other properties around me that are also in conservation easement, which is great. But we're still fighting with the federal government. The state had no issues. It took them a little while because when I put my property in the process was back in the 2015, when conservation easements were under tight scrutiny of the federal government and the state because they were having some issues. And we finally got through the state, and then the federal government came back and said, no, it wasn't entitled, and all kinds of mess. Supposedly, the attorney that conservation easement recommended, Larry Harvey, says we're settled, but I have not seen any results to indicate that level. So I'm still waiting and I'm still hopeful, but I am so grateful for the opportunity to have an avenue like Colorado Headwaters to put properties into conservation easements, to extend them to, whatever, because Grant County is losing to development and the high growth and lots of people moving into the county after COVID. So it's good to know that there's people out there who are wanting to preserve the agricultural use for the county. So I'm grateful to see that. And
Great.
I'm so grateful for Colorado Headwaters. It's just terrific.
Thank you. And before my next question for everybody, we'll consider the land trust itself, but I want to turn to Broc and Susan as Kathy did mention the growth and the development. So when you did decide to move here and you realized that your property had a conservation easement on it, or your property to be, what were your thoughts? Did that influence you at all? Conversations with me notwithstanding, and perhaps reflect on having a conservation easement now on your property.
Yeah, so we've actually owned up in Grand County since 2006, but we basically, bought a condo at the height of prices before the bubble burst in 2008. But for us, it was just a place to go every weekend when we were working. We're retired now, and we're spending way more time in Grand County than we ever did before. And we're looking at, and that's why we bought the land up there, because we really want to homestead up there and at least spend, months at a time in Grand County, not just weekends or a week at a time. So when we discovered it had the, like I said, when we learned that the piece of property we're really interested in, and it's absolutely gorgeous piece of property off Colorado 8, it's not that far from the downtown area or from the Safeway store in Fraser. But it's absolutely gorgeous. It's super quiet. I mean, you go out there and you can see the stars. There's no light from the city that blocks anything. We can just go out there and see amazing views from there. It's just gorgeous. Anyway, and then when we learned, when we put the offer on, and the agent that we were working with said, oh, by the way, there's a conservation easement. So that did cause the pause. And then we read all about what it was. And again, like I've already stated, that did, after we got educated, and once we learned what the conservation easement was all about, we were totally like, no problem. Yeah, it may change a little bit of where we're going to put a septic, or we're going to drop a well, or maybe where we're going to put the driveway. But at the end of the day, we're going to have half of our property is going to be forever what it looks like today, minus any, diseases of trees or whatever. But the aspen trees are absolutely healthy as can be. The beetle kill is gone. So all we're dealing with now is downed lumber, which, from our discussions with you guys, we can just leave it there and let it rot, or we can cut it up and burn it for firewood if we need to. And but it's just a piece of heaven right there. You guys have seen it. It's, pretty awesome little chunk of ground. And you guys that are on the panel with us are dealing with, significant chunks of
more acres.
You see more acres. But, we have less than 2 acres of conservation easement. It's a drop in the bucket, hopefully not a nuisance for you. We enjoy working with you. So we'll see you every year, Jeremy, and, when you come out and walk the property with us. But you know what our dreams are. We want to build that little house there and just kind of, be right next to that easement. We know that the wildlife will be good there, the runoff, there's a lot of water in that area. So It's actually not a great place to build a house on the conservation easement because it's actually a nice, it's a wetland. And that wetland comes with all of the wildlife that comes with wetlands, and, you know, we love it. I don't know if I answered your question. I probably went off on a bunny trail.
You know, these panels, it's really just to let people know what we in the community think about conservation, and no, you answered it very well. And so Kathy touched on this, and so I'll come back to you, Kathy, of why did you choose to work with Colorado Headwaters Land Trust to start with? To give some background, there are many land trusts throughout the state, but also throughout the country, many of whom have easements in Grand County, Colorado Cattlemen's and Colorado Open Lands, two of the statewide land trusts. So personally, I'm also curious to know, as a landowner, why you chose to go with the local outfit, Colorado Headwaters Land Trust, as opposed to anybody else.
Sure.
And since I wasn't around, I can't take credit. So.
Before my husband had passed on, we had looked into conservation easements, and he was not impressed with the Cattlemen's. He was not impressed with Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, which he is an avid member of, and was just disappointed. At that time, it was probably 20, 25, maybe 30 years ago. At that time, they were purchasing properties, and we would be totally, out of the picture. And we were not ready to give up the property at that time for any particular reason, whatever. And then when he passed on, I figured I need to look into this and get started again. And quite honestly, another rancher had recommended Colorado Headwaters, and I contacted them right away, and it was Cars, Puntsmiller, and I can't remember her name, Anna.
Mhm.
And they came to the property, which is pretty isolated, and we sat and had a wonderful chat over 2 hours. And I took them on the four-wheeler, and we toured the property, and they still couldn't believe while I was doing this, but I said it was my late husband's dream, and he turned it over to me before he had passed away, knowing that I would follow through with this. But I was so enamored with Cars and Anna that I just figured I have to do this. And it did take a little longer than I was anticipating, but I'm so grateful that I did. And the people now, the current people at Conservation Headwaters has been extremely helpful, and especially with this lawsuit. A lot of people have been very helpful and got me in the right direction with a great attorney who knows what the heck this is all about. So I'm kind of curious to know if anyone else is still having issues, or if the federal government is still harassing conservation easement owners. I still don't understand why I was chosen, if you will, because I don't have, 230 acres may sound like a lot, but it really isn't when you consider working ranches that have over, thousands of acres. And I am kind of in that sandwiched in between some of those larger ranches. So it does kind of in the same area. So it does kind of help bring that continuity that it will always be protected for ag land or wildlife preservation, whatever. So, but I am kind of curious to know if anyone else is having issues with the federal government, or if I'm just lucky enough to be the one.
Well, I can say that you aren't alone, and we have been discussing down the road having presentations done by tax consultants or attorneys to talk about kind of the history of conservation easements and the issues that landowners, unfortunately, like you, are facing. As the land trust, we have an odd role in that relationship. And so down the road, maybe you and I can talk and set up another panel or a conversation with some experts, and we can kind of work through some of those issues.
Yeah.
But I am sorry to hear that as every time you and I talk about this,
Yeah.
I wish there was more that we could do.
I know, but like I said too, even knowing what this chance that I would be one of the chosen to be audited or whatever, I would not hesitate to do what I did with a mountain property, because it is just, that's part of the reason it's called Grand County. It is a
Mm.
grand piece of property used for cattle grazing in the summertime, and I recreate there in the summertime as much as I can. Just like Dr. Brooks mentioned too, you know, and Susan and Broc, that you can't go very far without being able to see the stars and the Milky Way and the quiet. You just get away from the hustle and bustle of the noise in the city. And it's a little piece of heaven that we all cherish. And hopefully more and more people will decide to put their properties into conservation easements. It's a wonderful opportunity, and we never want you to go away.
Well, I'll do my best to stick around.
Yeah.
But I will turn to Dr. Brooks for the same question. You and the other 4 Granby 5 landowners, when you chose to work with us, I'm curious to know what the incentive was to stay local.
You know, I had good relationships, and I did something to get rid of my video. I clicked on something accidentally, but can you still see me?
Yep, we can see and hear you. Mhm.
Okay, good. Anyway, I had a relationship with, there we go, some of the members and the president, the executive director. Obviously, the proximity was close, being located in Granby. I never did contact Cattlemen's or Elk Foundation. I just kind of went with what I knew and what I was familiar with. And, you know, to maybe talk to Kathy's issue a little bit, I went through what sounds like what you're going through, Kathy. And I don't know if you were going to lead up to that question ever, Jeremy, of me relating to my story with similarly what Kathy went through.
It's all
Would
you.
this be a
Go
good time
for
to
it.
talk about that?
Yeah.
So, you know, the IRS, a year or two after I completed my easement, they did question the value, and I did get audited basically, and they were going to basically take me to court. And any of you know that has been through it, there's a lot of back taxes and tax sales of state tax income credits. It would have been a lot of paperwork going back through 3 or 4 years, tax returns, refunding money, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, long story short, I waited them out, and in the end, they just said, well, never mind. We're not going to pursue this. I never did retain an attorney, Kathy. I probably should have, but I kind of did the wait and see action. I think they kind of, the IRS did. They tried to shake me down, and I think they implied that they would settle for a different amount other than the value. So it wasn't the fact that my land wasn't agriculture or wildlife or scenic. It was they were questioning the dollar value, and
Yes.
and they put me through 11 months of stress and whatever. But in the end, it turned out well, and they left me alone. And I could go on about that some more, but hopefully things turn out well for you, and they did for me as well. So I was the chosen one in our group of 5, because our the Granby 5, they called us. We're all very similar values, very similar pieces of land. So if I would have fallen, the whole valley probably would have fallen as well. It would have been a domino effect. And I just kind of stood firm and waited it out. And I guess that strategy did work for me. However, I did lose a lot of sleep for those 11 months.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's still going on for me. It's been 6 years. The government
Oh my
still owes me my back taxes from 2015. And it's been a nightmare. And I just figured they were picking on me because I'm a single ranch owner, and they just figured that I would just go away. And I just decided I have to pursue this because they're wrong. This is not right. They tried to tell me that my property was not even appropriately labeled as conservation easement. And I was certainly hopeful that they were not going to go after Colorado Headwaters being the grantor of my easement, but I don't think they had any issues. But like I said, I'm still waiting. My attorney says it's settled, and I figured it won't be settled until they pay me back all my back taxes, and those are my refunds.
My,
So we'll
my.
see what happens. Hopefully I get it before I pass on.
Good luck with that. Yeah.
So I don't know if, yours was like 11 months, and I think that's really terrific. Why they decided that it wasn't worth it and they moved on, that's what I was kind of hoping they would do. And but it was settled out of court because mine was so similar to other cases that went through the trial, tax trial. But so I'm grateful I didn't have to do that. There is some good things. But, you do have to spend that extra money for the attorneys and their time and expertise. And then now the waiting game. So, and we had lots of interviews. I pulled in some tax expert people. I mean, it was quite arduous what they expected and what I had to show forth, back taxes and property values. But what it really was, they did not think that the property was appropriately valued. And it's ironic because at the time that my property went through that process, the Colorado Real Estate Board was in charge. And who better to know what property values are than the real estate industry rather than the attorney legal part of it. So, and they had a hard time fighting that. Maybe that's why they settled. I lost some of my tax carry forward, which was okay for me. I just told them I was not going to drop my property value anymore. And I did not want to have to pay interest on the back taxes owed. But supposedly they're going to pay me the interest and the back taxes. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, it won't be settled until the money's in the bank.
Oh, wow.
Brock,
One
I noticed-
lace in the hole I had, excuse me, was my appraiser, who is very well thought of. I won't mention his name. I can if you'd like me to, because I don't think I could if anybody is interested. He was also a consultant for the IRS. So that could have been one reason why they dropped me and didn't pursue it. However, I would have dug my heels in and fought it to the tooth and nail. But my appraiser who appraised mine was also a consultant for the IRS. So that would be a little funny if somebody who appraised mine was also the appraiser, and well, how come it's not worth what you appraised, the same guy?
Yeah.
So it was kind of a conflict there, or a little awkwardness.
Yeah.
Brock, I noticed that you unmuted. Would you like to say something?
Well, I was just going to add that, and you had already mentioned this at the beginning of the panel discussion, but unlike Kathy and Dr. Brooks, we bought into what was already a conservation easement situation.
Sure.
But ours was made a conservation easement back in like 2002, I think it was, or many years ago. And at the time, it was called Middle Park Land Trust. And then of course, I don't remember, Jeremy, at what year you guys took over as Colorado Headwaters, but it was at the time we saw at the time. I have all the paperwork that shows Middle Park Land Trust was the company or the organization at the time.
Yeah, I'll give a brief history here that we were founded as the Grand County Land Conservancy in 1995. And we held that name for about 8 years or so. In 2003, we changed our name to Middle Park Land Trust. The reason that we give, and I believe it's slightly of a joke, but it's because people might have been viewing us as some governmental office or a quasi-governmental office, and we were an independent 501c3 from day one. And so we transitioned from Grand County Land Conservancy to Middle Park Land Trust because that was our geographical region is Middle Park, which is largely Grand County. That decade, so from 2003 to 2013, I'd say looking at our records, that was our heyday. That was a really great decade. We acquired a lot of conservation easements and we really built our structure. In 2013, there were a couple events that happened that really persuaded the board and staff of that time to reconsider the name and realign our focus, or at least outwardly realign our focus to Grant County itself. And since we didn't want to go back to the name Grant County, we decided on Colorado Headwaters, because no other county in Colorado, no other region in Colorado can really call itself the headwaters of the Colorado River, save for us. And so that's when we adopted that name in 2013, and that's what we've been for where I guess we're going on 9 years almost. And so Mike knows us as both of those names, and then both you and Kathy would know us as Colorado Headwaters. So we've been talking for a while, and with my prepared questions, we do have a number of people listening in. If anyone would like to raise your hand or post a question in the comments, we'll be quiet for a second to see if anyone responds to that. Otherwise, the 4 of us or 5 of us can keep chatting for a little bit longer. I'll use this opportunity to remind people of Hats Off for Headwaters being the event that we're in now. It's a week long, starting on the 3rd on Sunday and going to next Sunday, the 10th. Our first panel on Sunday was with 2 of my colleagues, 2 conservation professionals in the county, Myra Sullivan with Headwaters Trails Alliance and Miles Miller, who's with the U.S. Forest Service. And the 3 of us had a great conversation about their careers and their positions and what it means to be working in conservation in Grant County. Tonight, as you can see, is with Landowners. And then on Thursday, which will be the 7th at 5:30 again, we'll be with what I'm calling the Land Trust Panel. And that will be with Paula Stewart, who's our board president, David Doty, our board treasurer, and Stuart McNabb, who is our longest serving board member as well. And the 4 of us will talk about the land trust and what it means to us. And I'll ask the 3 of them why they decided to join the board. So I see Paula has turned on her camera. Paula, would you like to ask a question?
No, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you, the president of the board, and I just very appreciative that you took your time to speak tonight, and we just appreciate your support and the fact that you're easement holders. So thank you.
Great. And we do have a question here from Michelle. How would you recommend to the land trust entities to encourage other landowners to protect their lands with a conservation easement? So talking to myself and my staff and board, what would you recommend I do and say to other landowners in the county to work with us or to work with anybody to conserve their properties? Dr. Brooks, we can start with you.
Well, if you've observed what has been happening, as I have for the last 40 plus years in this county, there's been quite a degradation of insect aquatic life, wading birds, amphibians. Just everything seems to be disappearing and changing, and I think it's due to a lot of things. And anything we can do to preserve chunks of riparian or other habitat would do to help. We're not seeing salamanders, we're not seeing the killdeers, we're not seeing the mayfly hatch, we're not seeing the salamanders, the leopard frogs are gone. Just the birds are not here. And I'm into the wildlife and the land itself, and the degradation I've seen the last 40 years has just been sad, and anything we can do to slow that is what would be the main thrust. Forget the money, forget the, if we could lock up land, especially valuable pieces of land for wildlife habitat, I think that's where I would put my thrust of importance. So
great. Kathy? Oh, you're muted. 1 second.
There we go. I have to piggyback on Dr. Brooks, what he had to say. Being at 9,000 foot elevation, we have the migration of the elk and the deer. And in the last 10 years, I have seen a dramatic change, not only because of climate change, but because of all the development that's happening around Kremlin. A lot of the elk seem to migrate from the Williams Peak area through my property to north of Kremling. And I mean, it's a large expansive area, but their migration patterns have changed because the elk, we don't see as much elk as we used to. And I know the numbers are dwindling, not only because the migration has changed, but because of all the development that makes their migration more difficult. We also used to have a good amount of sage grouse population. And I've seen a few, but not near as much as what it used to be. So it is both the birds and the large game animals. We do have mountain lions that are part of the problem, but I think the biggest thing is the fact that we just don't have the migration corridors that we used to have. And those are so important. So anything that we can do, people who are interested in protecting the hunting, protecting the wildlife, protecting the water resources, have to do things to help slow down the development. And that's the biggest thing. And I do want to protect the agriculture. The ranchers have to have land, and they're great stewards of the land. We don't want to see them disappear or go away. So any chance that we can to help the ranchers, I don't do that myself, obviously, but there are enough ranchers in my area that they all want to lease the property in the summertime for cattle grazing. And then I also have a local outfitter that leases the property for hunting rights. And it's been a good marriage. So I'm really happy about that. And it makes me feel good from my heart, knowing that I'm contributing to the goodness of planet Earth and a little piece of heaven in Grant County, to keep it that way.
Sure. That's beautiful. And Broc and Susan.
So I guess that I have some questions, maybe back to you, Jeremy, about, in order to create these, or in order to have conservation easements, you need landowners to divvy up their land and create these easements. Or, so I'm looking at, like, what does Colorado State have? Like, for instance, we've got the, Colorado Parks and Wildlife Division. We also have Bureau of Land Management. So are those lands already protected through Colorado state law, or are they at risk of being someday chopped up and developed?
Hold off. Yes.
Well, Bureau of Land Management is a federal agency through the Department of Interior. So they're kind of a sibling to the National Park Service and then a cousin to the U.S. Forest Service. And I say that because they're under different departments. So those are protected as much as they can be. I won't get into this too much because I could get myself in trouble, but there's ongoing conversations about who controls federal public land and who owns it and how it's used. And so we can certainly have a longer conversation, and I do have colleagues who can talk about it in a much more balanced and educated manner. And so at least for the BLM, like you mentioned, that is protected. Colorado Parks and Wildlife, I believe, owns land, and I might want to call on one of our participants to answer that if she can, because I believe we have a CPW rep here. But Colorado has state parks as well, aside from the wildlife, and those are also protected in various ways. The focus of land trusts such as ours, Colorado Cattlemen's, Open Lands, Eagle Valley Land Trust, and many others, is really to focus on private landowners. And I do include municipalities in that, as we saw with CHLT's latest easement. The Jones Creek Ranch Conservation Easement is owned by the town of Hot Sulphur Springs. So when I say private landowners, I'm really looking at governmental entities included that can't necessarily conserve land on their own, such as a state or a federal government can. And so that's what we focus on.
Right. So I guess that from my perspective, if I were to try to help increase the acreage of conservation easements, I would be looking for folks that actually own large chunks of land that are either unfamiliar, uninterested, and have a discussion. So, I spend some time over at Never Summer in Granby. So if I'm sipping on a beer and I meet a landowner, I'll ask him, hey, do do you have any conservation easements on your property? No, I don't do that. Well, you ought to talk to Jeremy. It might be a neat. So
I'll give you some of my business cards. You can hand them
okay,
out.
so do you, I mean, do you know who all the, I mean, you can look up in public records, figure out who all the big landowners are and
Sure.
determine how much of their land is already under an easement. You probably have those records or.
Yeah, so there are two parts that I'll answer. One is, I'll start with the second one. Conservation easements, as you learned purchasing your property, are title documents. So they're recorded at the county level, and relatively easy if you know where to look, relatively easy to find. But as a land trust, we're not governmental. We have no power of domain or anything like that. It really comes down to negotiation, communication. And I'd say, considering the projects that we're working on now, about 50% of them the conversation was started by either myself or a predecessor here at the office, sending a letter or initiating the conversation over a cup of coffee or something and just saying, hey, we exist. This is why we're talking to you, because your ranch or your property is in this region of the county. But of course, it's very delicate. Land and owning land, and especially owning land here in the West with mineral rights and water rights and a lot of the developmental pressures that Mike and Kathy mentioned, it's very delicate. And so as the land trust, we can't be too pushy on that side. And so we just like to let landowners know that we exist and we are at least interested in conserving your property. The other 50% are landowners who approached us. And as we heard from Dr. Brooks and Kathy, that they approached us and they said, hey, we want to do this. We've looked up, we've researched land trusts and conservation easements, and we want to work with you. And I think, I've been asked in the past, which is better, which do I prefer? And I really don't prefer either over the other one, because at the end of the day, the conversation will result in the same result. And so when we do have a strategic plan here at the office, and we certainly have regions of the county that we focus on, when I do cold call or if I have an event, I'll kind of shape the event around a certain region of the county to try and attract those landowners. But it's a much more delicate dance than I think if someone were working with a larger organization or a governmental organization.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Yeah, of course. So we are running up on our time. I promised the panelists about 45 minutes to an hour, and it's been about 45 minutes. So I'll open it up again to the participants, to the audience here, if there are any other questions. Otherwise, I'll ask our panelists for their final words. Let's just wait a minute to see if anyone types it into the chat. Well, barring that, we'll start with Broc and Susan. I'd just like to hear, and if you have final words to say about now owning property with a conservation easement and working with the land trust, any final thoughts or words to share with the crowd?
I could just say that this was great. I learned some things tonight, Jeremy. Thank you. And it's been a pleasure working with you all. And I know that over the next few years, we'll certainly be seeing you on a routine basis. If not on business, maybe over at Carver's for breakfast.
There you go. Looking forward to it. And I'm looking forward to your new house. I think where you've positioned it will really benefit the community and the conservation easement. Kathy, any final words for this evening? Oh, 1 second.
I seem to forget that.
It's
Sorry.
okay.
I'm just eternally grateful to Colorado Headwaters and the goals of what you've presented moving forward. And I feel very confident that you're going to be around for a long, long time. My biggest concern was, how can the conservation easement guarantee no development in perpetuity? It seems mind-boggling to me. But knowing how and getting more familiar with how the conservation easement works, I feel very confident that Colorado Headwaters will proceed in the right direction. and encouraging other landowners. I know you're working very hard to make that happen. And I've seen new properties coming in online, and I think more and more people, especially with COVID and climate change, the forest fires that have affected Grand County so horrifically, people have got to realize that climate change is real, and we are the ones who can help correct that problem. And conservation easements are one of the best avenues for that goal. So I'm enthusiastic, and I'm excited to think that we are going to see more conservation in Grand County and throughout the state of Colorado. It's the
Great.
way to go.
Thank
Thanks,
you so
Jeremy,
much.
for the opportunity.
Of course, thank you. And Dr. Brooks?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned the wildlife aspect, but I think the path there is just to conserve that ground, and indirectly, I think if we can preserve our agricultural heritage, as Kathy said, most, if not all, ranchers are good stewards of the land. It'd be self-defeating not to be. And it is a good commingling with the grazing, the flood irrigation, recharging the aquifers, charging up those wetlands that we, as opposed to having a dry, arid river of, we create riparian areas, and ag does that as a side effect of being productive. I mean, we're losing productive acreage that for forage and so forth. So, if we can encourage the development and the preservation of ag, I think that would be another factor, because it's getting tougher and tougher to find grazing leases between the fishing clubs buying them up and private owners who really don't want cattle in their yard. Look what's going on up at Cousins Meadow right now. That whole debacle, what a mess. But anyway, if we can at least maybe do the wildlife via the ag, that would be a good thing, and preserve that ag land as well. So I'm biased because that's what I do. So
Well, thank you so much again. And to all four of you for joining us this evening and speaking so well about conservation and conservation easements. I really appreciate it. And so to close out this evening, I'll put back on that slideshow that talks about this event and our sponsors and some of the auction items. So stick around for a few minutes and you can watch that go through. Otherwise, join us again on Thursday for a panel with some of my board members. And then on Sunday at the Headwaters Center, we should have a fun time out there. Thanks so much.
Great.
Very
Thanks,
good.
Jeremy.
Thank you. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Jeremy.
Bye-bye.
We've already seen